Hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending upon when you are watching this video lecture. In the earlier classes, in relation to chapter 2 in the income tax portion related to residential status and tax incidence, we discussed about section 6, which is basically determination of residential status of different types of SSEs, individuals more particularly, and other types of SSEs like partnership firms, companies, AOP, BOI, artificial juridical person, etc. Mostly individuals and HUF have a bit of calculation involved in that, and we have practiced the questions which ask us to determine the residential status of individuals as well as HUF and other types of SSEs in general, which are all part of section 6 of the Income Tax Act. And then one of the most important things about scope of total income or incidence of tax, which has been contained in section 5, was also discussed, in which we tried to identify what types of incomes are taxable in the hands of each type of SSE having different residential statuses. For example, for ROR, resident and ordinarily resident, every income is taxable. Wherever it is earned, wherever it is received, irrespective of that, entire global income of a ROR will be taxable in his hands, as long as it has been received in the previous year. That is enough. Same way for RNOR, the incomes which are either received in the India or deemed to be received in India, which are accrued or arising in India or deemed to accrue or arise in India, of course will be taxable, because those are taxable in all cases, whether it is ROR, RNOR or NR. But for RNOR, there is another thing that is also taxable. If the income has been accrued or arisen outside India and received also outside India, but from a business which has been controlled from India or a profession which has been set up in India, then such income derived from such business or profession will be taxable in the hands of RNOR. But of course, that will not be taxable in the hands of non-resident, that is NR. So, two extremes. One is ROR, everything is taxable. Other extreme, NR, as long as the income is received and earned outside India, nothing is taxable. Then RNOR, of course, whatever that has a connection with India, whether accrued, arisen, deemed to accrue or deemed to arise, received or deemed to receive, all of them are taxable for RNOR also, ROR also, NR also. But RNOR has only one additional thing where the word controlled from India is used. If that is the case, in relation to any business or profession controlled from India or set up in India, though the income has been earned and received outside India, still that becomes taxable for RNOR. This is all the tax incidence in relation to different types of SSEs, and tax incidence definitely depends upon three factors. One factor is common, of course, the income must be earned during the previous year. And second factor, important factor, is residential status. And the third important factor is where that income has been actually earned. That is for understanding we use, but technically the word used in the law is income accrued or arisen. In India, different story. Outside India, different story. So the place of accrual or place of receipt of income also matters in determining the tax incidence. That is all part of section 5. Then naturally the question comes, what do you mean by received? Of course, received means received only. That does not require any explanation. But one very important point to note in that received word is the income is received when it is first received only. Afterwards, if the same income has been remitted later, that will not be considered as receipt. So remittances are not receipts. Whenever the income is first received, that only is considered as receipt. That is an important sideline point to be noted in relation to the word received. Also, when we talk about the word deemed to be received, it has been defined in section 7. What are the incomes which are deemed to be received? There are broadly 3 different things or 4 different things we can say. First one, if employer contributes to the recognized provident fund of employee in excess of 12% of salary, that excess amount is deemed to be received, though practically it is not received. That continuation will not be there in law. We need to understand that. So deemed to be received itself means it is not actually received, but still it is deemed to be received. So that is first case. Contribution to the recognized provident fund in excess of 12% of salary. Then another one is annual accretion in the provident fund, simply nothing but interest credited to the provident fund in excess of 9.5% per annum. That is also deemed to be received by naturally the employee, because that is the person in whose benefit these monies are all getting credited, though directly money is not given to employee. So up to 12% employer's contribution is not taxable. We can call that as exempt. Up to 9.5% per annum interest rate also is not taxable. These are one-way exemption limits which are prescribed in law. Though we cannot use these words exactly, for understanding purposes, we can use that word. So up to 12% per annum of the employer's contribution, 12% of salary is not taxable. Beyond that, the excess amount of employer's contribution is taxable. Same way, interest up to 9.5% per annum is not taxable. In excess of that, it will be taxable. For example, if the interest is credited to the recognized provident fund, say 10%, then entire amount is not taxable. 0.5% of the principal amount on which the interest is given, that only becomes taxable. In excess of 9.5% will be taxable. Same way, contribution of employer also in excess of 12% of salary will be taxable. Both these points, once again, we will encounter in the chapter of salaries. There we can understand in little bit detail, but yeah, numbers wise there is nothing special. Same provision will be once again repeated in the chapter of salaries later. That is 2 items part of section 7 which are deemed to be received, though they are not really received. Same way, if any contribution to the national or notified, we can say pension schemes which are specified in section 80 CCD, if employer or central government contributes to certain pension funds or pension schemes, then also that amount is deemed to have been received by the beneficiary. Naturally, the beneficiary will be employee. That is another thing which is deemed to have been received. Another thing is shifting of the money, or we can say transfer of the fund from unrecognized provident fund to a recognized provident fund. If that happens, that is deemed to have been received. Why is that? We will see that in detail in the salaries chapter. But provision is this: if any amount is transferred from an unrecognized provident fund to a recognized provident fund, of course both belonging to the same person, the same employee, but earlier the money was in unrecognized provident fund, now that is transferred from that fund to a recognized provident fund, immediately that money becomes taxable because it is deemed to have been received by the employee, though practically he has not received any money. Just some account transfer happened from unrecognized provident fund to a recognized provident fund. Still, as per law, as per section 7, these are all the amounts which are deemed to have been received by the SSC. And same way, when we talk about accrued or arising, or in India or outside India, whatever the place that may be, when we can say income is accrued, is accrual and due both are same? Answer is no. Accrual is different, due is different. Accrual is different, receipt is different. Accrual happens irrespective of whether the same amount is due or not. So in other words, it is earned, we can say, though whether it is due or not. So simply speaking, according to the accrual concept of accounting, generally in relation to the items which are related to say time period, something like salaries or something like interest incomes, These are all the things which can be accrued in a particular period, though they may not be completely received also, though they may not be really due also. So that is why what matters as far as Income Tax Act is concerned, in order to have tax incidence, is it accrual that matters or due that matters? What matters is accrual. Due is immaterial. Again the same question. Does accrual matter or receipt matter? Once again, accrual matters, but not receipt. That does not mean if any income is received, it is not taxable. If it is received in advance, that does not mean that. So in general, income tax gets attracted in relation to an income which is either accrued or received, whichever is earlier. That is the general rule in relation to the income. Whether accrued or received, whichever is earlier, that becomes taxable. However, once an income has been taxed on accrual basis, the same income cannot be taxed once again on receipt basis. In other words, same income cannot be taxed twice. Double taxation is not permissible, but that is a concept. Natural justice, we can say. It is not fair to tax the same income again and again. That is why if an income has already been taxed on accrual basis, it will not be taxed once again on receipt basis. That doesn't make sense. These are the points to be noted in relation to the concept of accrual and what is the meaning of due. And the next important aspect, which is related to section 9, subsection 1, we discussed about that half of that yesterday. That is income deemed to accrue or arise in India. So when we talked about income deemed to be received, I told you the focus is not on the word India, the focus is mostly on the word received. Though it is not received, it is deemed to be received. So those are all part of deemed to be received in India. But here, in this case, that was section 7. Now in section 9.1, you should remember this. This is very important section. You can understand how many things are covered in same section. Naturally, it will be important. So section 9.1 is about income deemed to accrue or arise in India. So here what is the important point? Here is deemed important point, or accrue or arise important point, or India important point. I would say here India is the important point, because any income is normally okay to be accrued or arisen, but here we are talking about not any income, that is the income which is deemed to accrue or arise in India. In other words, in these following cases, income is taxable in India. That's it. When it is deemed to accrue or arise in India, automatically it becomes taxable in India. Though on the face of it, it may look like it is not under the purview of Indian government. In spite of that, instead of that, or even without even considering that, we don't care about the other, how they look, what is their normal nature, all those things immaterial. Why? Once the law says, because these are all deemed to occur or arise in India, naturally those are all taxable in India very simply. So basically this is the portion we are talking about mostly here, that is India. So which are the ones which are taxable in India, or which have a tax incidence in India? That is all the cases mentioned in section 9.1. But of course, this is only restricted to one of them. There are 4 things broadly. One is income received in India. 2, income deemed to be received in India. 3, income accrue or arise in India. 4, deemed to accrue or arise in India. So we are talking about the 4th one, that is income deemed to accrue or arise in India under section 9 subsection 1. What are all those things? Directly or indirectly, if any income is accruing or arising even outside India, but through or from a business connection in India. So another word which has been very importantly used here in this particular case is, this is the word, that is business connection. So any business connection is there. If there is any business connection in India, then income derived outside India also is deemed to be accrued in India. Same way, if the income is coming from any property or asset or any other source of income in India, automatically it is deemed to occur or arise in India. And same way, if any transfer of capital asset happens situated in India, once again, asset is situated in India and it is transferred in the sense sold, simply speaking. If an asset is sold in India, naturally any income derived from that is deemed to accrue or arise in India. So these two things are actually not very big deal because they are very normal. Without this provision also, anybody can just generally imagine, boss, if the income source is in India, imagine somebody is collecting rent from a property situated in India, though it is received outside India, naturally since the property is situated in India, it is deemed to accrue or arise in India. Same way, if the property in India is transferred, though the deal happened outside India, agreement happened outside India, money transferred outside India, doesn't matter. If the property is situated in India, capital asset is situated in India, if any such transfer happens, then also the income is deemed to accrue or arise in India. Then we can say all of them are taxable in India. Tax incidents will be there in India. But very important point here is the business connection. That is one thing which we are going to discuss in today's class later. But on a broader basis, the first point gives us various types of incomes which are all deemed to accrue or arise in India. And not only that, salary earned for services rendered in India. Once again, here also the word India matters. If any salary is earned by rendering some services in India, it is taxable. But there is one more variety item here. Even if the services are rendered outside India, there is something that is taxable. When is that? What is a particular special case there? It is not normal. This doesn't match with common sense. That is why law will come into picture. So, according to this section 9.1, salary payable by government to Indian citizen, that too, Indian citizen, for services rendered outside India will be taxable in India as normal income which is deemed to accrue or arise in India. Though this person is not a ROR, doesn't matter. He might be NR also, he might be a non-resident also. But that doesn't matter. Even though services rendered outside India, that also doesn't matter. Since the salary is payable by government, and government is paying the salary to an Indian citizen, that is also an important point actually in the problems. Imagine there is a German national working in the Indian embassy in Berlin, and the Indian government pays him because ultimately he is the employee of the Indian government only. So he earns some salary in Germany, but he is German national. Does it also become taxable in India? No, not possible because he is not Indian citizen. So this person, in order to be taxable in India, it has to be, that SSC has to be an Indian citizen. So Indian citizen working outside India and salary is paid by the government for services rendered outside India will be taxable in India because it is deemed to accrue or arise in India. Same way, another point, dividend is paid by an Indian company. Doesn't matter whether it is paid in India, outside India, always that income is deemed to accrue or arise in India. So these are all some of the points in section 9.1. Now, the other three things can be actually considered as one category, that is interest, royalty and fees for technical services. These are all three things we can consider as one category. Interest, these words you have to remember. One is interest, two is royalty, three is fees for technical services. Fees for technical services. If they are all payable by government, first let us focus on this. Automatically those are all deemed to accrue or arise in India. There is no other second thought, no other second discussion required. So, if interest or royalty or fees for technical services is payable to anybody, no conditions, anybody in the world, non-resident, doesn't matter, anybody. If these things are payable by whom? Interest, royalty and fees for technical services payable by government. If they are payable by government, then government, of course, government of India, not government of Pakistan or government of Germany. Government means our government we are talking. So, if it is payable by government of India, automatically that is deemed to accrue or arise in India. That's it. Then, another question comes, what if these three things only, interest, royalty, fees for technical services, are paid by a non-resident? Means what? Payable by a non-resident. See, normally if it is payable by a non-resident, if it is payable to ROR. We don't care about all this, no? Why should we worry about it? Because ROR, any income is taxable, so we don't need to worry about section 9(1) is applicable or not, is income deemed to accrue or arise or not. That doesn't matter. So understand the broader concept. Whenever we talk about this section 9(1), we are not talking about the recipient being ROR. If recipient is ROR, it doesn't matter. All these things do not matter. Anyway, everything will be taxable. Then these things, why are we deeming them to accrue or arise in India? For basically non-residents also. And by the way, this is not only related to individuals. These are all not the provisions. Section 9(1) is not related to individuals only. So for a resident, anyway, incomes are all taxable. For non-residents, only the incomes which are either received in India or deemed to have been received in India, accrued or arisen in India, or deemed to have been accrued or arisen in India, only becomes taxable for non-resident. That is where the deemed to accrue or arise provisions will become relevant. For a resident, we don't need any of these things. Directly, anything will be taxable. So we don't need to establish business connection. We don't need to see what happened, where the services are rendered, India, outside India, what, this, government. None of this becomes relevant for resident. Particularly in case of individuals, for ROR, all these things do not make any kind of difference. Even for RNOR also and NR also, it makes difference. Why? Because these things are generally not taxable if they are not received in India. But they will become taxable because they are deemed to accrue or arise in India. So that is why for non-resident and RNOR, these things become relevant in problems also, practically also. So we are not talking about the recipient here. Here, who is the person we are talking about? Here we are talking about who are these three people: government, resident and non-resident. These are not recipients. These are payable by, means payers. Recipient is the SSC. He could be either RNOR or NR. ROR we don't care because always anyway taxable. These things do not matter. We don't need to waste time on ROR here. So recipient is not the point we are talking. Clear? Earlier we were talking about recipient in this case. For example, in this case, the Indian citizen we were talking about. Who is this Indian citizen? He is the recipient of money. And who was the payer then? Payer was government. So now we can conclude this also. If you add this also, salary also. So salary or interest or royalty or fees for technical services, if it is payable by government, automatically it becomes taxable in India. That can be concluded. Irrespective of the place. Of course, if it is services rendered in India, anyway it is taxable. We don't need special consideration for that. So irrespective of the place of accrual and place of receipt, if any salary, interest, royalty, fees for technical services, any of these amounts are payable by the government, automatically they all become taxable, irrespective of the residential status of the SSC, irrespective of the place of accrual actually. So that is clear. Now let us talk about other three. If interest, royalty, fees for technical services only are payable now, payable by a non-resident. Recipient could be anybody. Recipient could be naturally a non-resident or even an RNOR. Possible. Now, in case of interest, we are talking about interest particularly. If there is interest that is borrowed and used for the purpose of business or profession carried in India, if that is the case, then even if interest is payable by a non-resident and received by a non-resident also, that will be taxable in India because it is deemed to accrue or arise in India. So let us not complicate this unnecessarily. We can just keep it in a very simple way. When it becomes taxable, when it is not taxable, that is the only thing we have to just understand. All things are same. Actually, whether it is payable by a non-resident also, whether it is payable by a resident also. Are we bothered about the payer here? Though they are given separately, are we bothered about the payer here? Payer is important or SSC is important? Actually, the SSC is important. Payer is important when the payer is government. That's all. In all other cases, payer doesn't matter. Payer could be a resident also, non-resident also, we don't care. Ultimately, the recipient of income, in case of interest, who will receive the income? The person who gave the loan will receive the income. Now what question we have to ask is, okay boss, you have given a loan and on that loan you have received an interest. Question is where that loan is used. Where it is it used? If it is used for the purpose of business or profession carried on in India, then the interest so received will become taxable because it is deemed to accrue or arise in India. Same way, nothing else. Royalty also, fees for technical services also, if they are utilized for the purpose of a business or profession carried on in India or making income from any source in India. See, in case of interest, this any source is not there, only business or profession is there. In case of royalty and fees for services, there is one more word which is added for the royalty and fees for technical services, that is any source in India. Means if any royalty is received or any fees for technical services is received in relation to a business or profession carried on, once again always main point here is India. If that is done in India, then automatically that income is deemed to be received, deemed to be accrued or arisen in India. And what are the exceptions? Exceptions means where it is not deemed to accrue or arise in India. We don't need to look a very great thing here. Naturally, when it is deemed to accrue or arise in India, when it is used for the purpose of a business or profession carried on in India, when it will be not deemed to accrue or arise in India, naturally, when that has been used for the purpose of a business or profession carried on outside India. So here also, when this is used for the purpose of something which is outside India. So here it is in India, here it is outside India. So no two different things, both are same. So for the interest and royalty and fees for technical services, we don't need to break our heads. It is very simple. All that we need to see is, okay, income is earned by some person. How is it earned? In case of interest, it is different because what he has given is money. The one who is earning interest is the person who has given money. Then we have to check where that money is used. If that money is used for a business or profession carried on in India, that is deemed to accrue or arise in India. If not, if that money is used for a business or profession outside India, then that is deemed to accrue or arise also outside India. There is no taxability in that case. Of course, here the payer doesn't matter whether it is resident or whether it is a non-resident. The payer is not the one who is important. Always what you have to look at is two things. I would actually put it this way. There are two major things that you have to look at, particularly when we talk about interest, royalty and fees for technical services. First thing what you have to look at is that paid by government? First point is that. Answer is yes. Even salary also. Salary, interest, royalty, fees for technical services, is that paid by government? If it is paid by government, automatically that becomes paid by government. Automatically that becomes taxable. That becomes part of section 9(1), which means it is deemed to accrue or arise in India. That is 4 boxes covered in one shot. That is simply one word we can say, paid by government. Done. Next, paid by doesn't matter. Paid to whom? That also doesn't matter. Paid for the purpose of what, that matters here. So in case, let us say interest or royalty or fees for technical services. In these three cases, if the money is received by a non-resident or a RNOR, and if that money is used for, not by, not to, for a business or profession in India, if any money which is borrowed and on which the interest has been paid, that money is used for a business or profession in India. If that happened, then also automatically that becomes deemed to accrue or arise in India. In case of interest, that is the purpose for which the money that has been lent is used. So where the money is actually utilized, that matters. So what matters is not the payer. What matters is the recipient, and second one is purpose. So purpose matters here. Purpose for which the interest is payable, purpose for which the royalty is payable or a fees for technical services payable. Is it related to a business or profession in India? That if that is the case, then automatically everything becomes deemed to accrue or arise in India. So majorly all these points, interest, royalty, fees for technical services, including this salary, So all these points will generally come down to these two things. If we can have the logic, these two logics will be enough. One, are they paid by government? Yes. Then they are deemed to accrue arise in India. No. That means they are not covered by section 9(1). Second, if these amounts are payable in relation to any business or profession in India, then if yes, yeah, then they are deemed to accrue arise in India. No, if they are related to the business or profession outside India, then they are not deemed to accrue arise in India. So they are outside India. If they are utilized, then automatically nothing is taxable in India. If they are utilized in India, then everything will be taxable irrespective of the residential status. Once again, I'm reiterating, don't you even think about any of these things in case of ROR. For ROR, we don't need to worry about anything. Even though income is not deemed to accrue or arise in India, also it becomes still taxable. When it becomes irrelevant whether income is deemed to accrue or arise in India, particularly for non-residents or sometimes even RNOR, these things become relevant. If the income is received by a non-resident in respect of a loan that he has extended, which is utilized for a business or profession carried on in India, naturally that becomes taxable in India. So, example, if you take some Mr. X from France has lent some money to Mr. Y in Bangalore. X from France has lent some money to Y in Bangalore, and Y paid interest to X naturally. Payment happened outside India, doesn't matter. So, question comes, is this interest taxable in the hands of X? And that X never comes to India, he doesn't know where is India also. So, just like that, he is somewhere outside India, he is a non-resident, not an Indian citizen, completely a non-resident. But still it becomes taxable in his hands if the Y who has received this money in India has utilized that money for the purpose of any business or profession in India. So, if you take any loan for the purpose of carrying on any business or profession in India and you pay that, when you pay that, you are not the SSE. Recipient is the other party. Who is the SSE there? The person who is receiving that interest. And that person who is receiving the interest will also have to pay tax because he is receiving interest on such sums of money which have been utilized for the purpose of business or profession carried on in India. That is the main point here. So that is why main point here always will be for business or profession in India. That is the main point. That has to be checked. And same thing applies to royalty also, fees for technical services also. Royalty, for example, Suzuki company has to receive some royalty from Maruti Suzuki every year, because Maruti Suzuki uses the designs, engines and other copyrighted, patented things or scientific innovations of Suzuki Japan. So every year Maruti Suzuki India Limited, which is a company in India, which is an Indian company, gives some royalty to Suzuki, the parent company Suzuki in Japan. The question comes once again, only for example purposes. Once again, don't think too big that we are becoming tax consultants for Suzuki and Maruti and all that. No, we are not. A lot of other things will be there. So many other arrangements and agreements also will be there. So don't enter into those things. Only example we are talking about. So in this case, Maruti pays royalty to Suzuki Japan. Maruti India pays royalty to Suzuki Japan. Question comes whether it will become taxable in the hands of Suzuki Japan or not, because Suzuki is a non-resident. It is not an Indian company. So it is not a resident. Assuming it doesn't have place of effective management also in India. So Suzuki has no problem being a non-resident normally. But according to this provision, the royalty that Suzuki Japan receives also will become taxable. Why? Because why that royalty is received? Because of the services which the Suzuki has given, and where those services are utilized for the purpose of a business or profession carried on in India, or making any income from any source in India, which really happened, yes. And when the Suzuki has given the details of designs to Maruti India, Maruti, what it is doing with those designs, are the inventions or patents, it is using them for the purpose of business or profession in India. So definitely this royalty will be taxable in the hands of Suzuki Japan. Even though it is a non-resident, it is taxable. Why? since that income is deemed to accrue or arise in India, because the royalty is received in respect of the services which are utilized for the purpose of a business or profession carried on in India. Same with fees for technical services also. Any such examples can be taken. Imagine there is an architect in London and who has sent some designs only for the construction of a big building. For example, for Mukesh Ambani, he has appointed an architect for his personal house, which was already completed now. But earlier, let us say, this building design was all sent by an architect in London. And naturally, Mukesh Ambani would have paid some money to that architect. Naturally, that also would be in crores. So let us just, for example, let us say Mukesh Ambani paid that architect in London 5 crores rupees as fees. That is fees for technical services. In the place of architect, you can keep lawyer, chartered accountant, anybody, any technical services, consultant, anybody. So just for example, we are taking this. Then the question comes, is this 5 crores taxable in the hands of that London architect? Once again, that London architect doesn't know what is India. He never would have visited India also. He is completely non-resident. No link with India, but still that will be taxable. Why? Because it is deemed to occur or arise in India. And why is it deemed to occur or arise in India? Because the technical services are utilized for the purpose of business or profession carried on in India or making income from any source in India. Of course, in this particular case, you may say that this is a residential house, so these services are not utilized for the purpose of business or profession, so it is not taxable. That argument is okay. But what if this building design is for not actually a residential building, if it is for a commercial building? What if the services are utilized for business or profession or for making any income from any source in India? So any source includes income from house property also. So we cannot completely argue that it is a residential building, hence it is not taxable. So not entering into that, if any person as a professional renders some services even from outside India, nowadays though actually it is quite possible to render services from outside India. Like for example, lot of times movies and all, Bahubali was made. So many people from Iran and so many people from different countries, France and all, worked on the graphics. Those are they have given technical services to a business which is carried on in India or for making any income from any source in India. So all those people who have received money from the producers of Bahubali, are those incomes taxable in India? Of course, yes. Because they gave services, they gave their professional services or technical services to a business or profession carried on in India. So that becomes taxable because it is deemed to occur or arise in India. So very important points to notice. Always, if it is money, we have to see where the money is utilized. In India, definitely taxable. Same way, fees for technical services are royalty. Again, we have to see the destination, not the source. Destination, where the services are finally utilized, where the royalty is finally, where the purpose for which the royalty is finally paid is being served. Where is it? Why is it paid? Is it for the purpose of any business or profession in India? If yes, then automatically that all becomes taxable because they all fall under the category of income deemed to accrue or arise in India. That's it. These are the points related to interest, royalty and fees for technical services. Then these things are all can be summarized into 2 points. Just check whether it is paid by government. Just also check whether that payment is happening for the purpose of a business or profession in India. Ultimately, the destination should be in India. The place where that money or services or patents or knowledge or a design, ultimately where is that utilized, where it should be utilized. Ultimately, if it happens to be in India, then such income derived from such rendering of services or giving money or giving patents or giving designs will be deemed to occur or arise in India. Simple. Clear? These are the points to be noted. And there is only just a recent amendment we can say, which is also added as an income which is deemed to accrue or arise in India. Clear? Then one more point here is just income arising outside India. See here we are talking about outside India. If everything is in India, we don't need to deem it, no. If really it has been in India, why should we deem it to occur arise in India? It will be definitely in India only. But here, even though the income is arising outside India, and what type of income? Being any sum of money paid without consideration. See, whenever you use this word, any sum of money paid without consideration. If A gives some money to B without consideration, what can we call that? That is simply nothing but gift. That's what we call it as gift. Anything without consideration is nothing but gift. So, this provision is related to gift. Gift. Where? Where it was given? Outside India. Right? By whom? By a resident Indian. By whom? A resident Indian. Very clear. To whom? To a non-corporate, non-resident. Non-resident. It is given. Or even a foreign company. See, foreign company also is there. So that means everybody is covered. No? When it is non-corporate, non-resident or foreign company means basically any non-resident. Foreign company also or an individual non-resident also. If a resident gives any money outside India as a gift to some NRI or anybody else, actually non-resident, not resident, non-resident Indian. Resident Indian gives any money as a gift to a non-resident or a foreign company where that sum of money exceeds 50,000 rupees, exceeds 50,000 rupees. If that amount exceeds, then the entire amount received by whom? Who is the SSC here? Is the SSC resident? Definitely not. Always you should not even have that question. SSC is not resident. If SSC is resident, we don't need all this. SC is non-resident. Who received the money? Non-resident. Or a foreign company. Where they received outside India. So normally it looks like nothing is taxable. But why is it taxable? Because it is paid by a resident Indian. So, if any resident Indian gives any gift to a non-resident or a foreign company in excess of 50,000 rupees per annum, when nothing is mentioned in the act, always you have to take it as per annum. We don't need to specially mention again and again. 50,000 rupees in the previous year. If the aggregate of such sum is more than 50,000 rupees, then such amount will be taxable in the hands of whom? That foreign company or the non-resident, whoever has received that gift. So simply this entire point can be considered into a nutshell like who gave the money? Who gave the money? Resident Indian. To whom he has given? To a non-resident individual or a foreign company. How much he has given? More than 50,000 rupees. Sir, what if he has given 50,000 rupees? Not taxable, sir. This provision is not applicable. That means it is not taxable. Simple. So up to 50,000 rupees not taxable. If the amount exceeds 50,000 rupees, then also question comes, how much will be taxable? Is it in excess of 50,000? Is that the word used here? No. This 50,000 is not useful for calculations here. It is only a condition. For example, if X from Bengaluru gives a gift to Y from Paris, amount 60,000 rupees, right? X from Bengaluru gives a gift to Y from Paris, amount 60,000 rupees. Question comes, is that taxable in the hands of Y, who is a non-resident, a foreign national completely, nothing to do with India? Answer is still yes, sir. Why? Because that gift has been paid by a resident Indian to a non-resident individual. So it is taxable, though it is paid outside India, though that non-resident Y from Paris has received it outside India, still it becomes taxable since it is deemed to occur arise in India, and also the amount exceeded 50,000 rupees. All this is okay. Taxable, answer is yes. Question comes, how much, sir? How much taxable? Is it 10,000 or 60,000? Answer is 60,000. So here, don't imagine the provisions. Don't try to create assumptions. Somewhere else we did like in excess of. So we will use the same logic everywhere. No, each provision is unique. That provision has that logic, leave that. This provision has this logic. Here the word used in the law is not in excess of. What the word used? Where the aggregate of such sum exceeds 50,000. That's it. If the aggregate of such sum exceeds 50,000, then the entire income arising outside India becomes taxable. Nobody said in excess of 50,000 only it becomes deemed to occur or arise in India. No. So once again, I want to repeat this. This 50,000 rupees is not useful for any kind of calculation. It is only a condition checking. Exceeds 50,000, fully taxable. Doesn't exceed 50,000, nothing is taxable. So simply, this 50,000 is useless for calculation purposes. Only for condition checking purposes it is useful. So that is where any gift received by a non-resident, whether an individual or a foreign company, from a resident Indian is taxable, of course, when if that is received on or after 5th July 2019. So this is another important point because this is the first year we are talking about this provision. That is why it is important. Otherwise, it has no big deal. Then again, people may ask, sir, why 5th July? No answer, sir. Why 50,000? No answer, sir. Those things cannot be answered. That is government who will decide all these dates and amounts. So that's what they thought and they introduced this as simple as that. Reason behind this? Yes, that's a different story. Reason behind this could be to avoid money laundering. Because a lot of times what people might do is that they are outside India and they are receiving hefty amounts of money from people within India. And within India, people may just like that, for record purposes, say that it is agricultural income, we have received it. So some unknown person, X, who will have only agricultural income in India, say 2 crores rupees per annum, he will not pay 1 rupee tax also because it is agricultural income and it is exempt from tax. So what he will do, these 2 crores rupees, he will show it as agricultural income in India and he will gift it to Y somewhere else. Why actually this money is given, what Y has done to X, that all things we cannot trace, because practically what happens, it is impossible to actually track, and that is not the job of government also. So irrespective of the reason why the X has given this money to a person outside India, if the outside India person receives any sum of money in the form of a gift for no reason, if there is any service rendered by the non-resident, then it's understandable. For no reason he is giving, means it is gift. Just like that, A is giving some money to B, why will give? Why should he give? That means it is gift. So the no reason is giving. So like that, money can be probably drained out of India by many people. In order to restrict that, in order to somehow curtail such type of practices, probably this provision would have been introduced. On a broader level, if you understand, it is basically to curtail the money laundering, curtail the transfer of money from unknown person to unknown persons outside India. So from India, money is going out of India to curtail that flow. If money comes from outside India to India, we don't curtail that. We will say, come on, no problem, red carpet. But we should not let the money go from India to outside India. No? Somehow we have to stop that. And one of the ways, not that because of this provision money will stop, but some of the ways will be to create little bit of stringent tax provisions. Now what happens? If an unknown person called A gives any gift to an unknown person called B, unknown in the sense not related with each other, and that person B receives the money from A just like that, Phukat mein he receives that, it is gift given by A to B. Amount is more than 50,000 rupees. Just like that, A gave 1 crore rupees to B. And B, being a non-resident, earlier what used to happen before this provision was not there, he never received the money in India, he did not render any services in India, so it is not accrued, nothing is taxable in the hands of B earlier. Like that, people used to drain out the money outside India. So instead of calling it as a royalty, instead of calling it as a fees for technical services or interest, they used to bluff, saying that, no, it is not royalty, it is not fees for technical services, it was a gift, just like that I gave. But how do we know? Maybe B has rendered some services to A, they are not showing that, we don't know that. So earlier they used to escape such type of things. Because to curtail such type of practices, government has introduced this provision. Okay, Baba, no problem. If you give money to somebody outside India in the form of a gift also, that somebody has to pay tax in India, since that somebody's income in the form of gift which exceeds 50,000 rupees is deemed to occur or arise in India. That is one more provision, the last one in relation to section 9.1. Once again, I am repeating, section 6, of course, is the core section, determination of residential status. Section 5 is the scope of income, which is the most important section for problems. Then section 7 is okay. Mostly for theory purposes it is useful, not much for problems of this chapter, though it is useful in the salaries chapter later. Then the next important section we have to refer in almost every question in the notes. Definitely will be section 9.1. So this table you have to be 100% thorough with. What are the things which are deemed to accrue or arise in India? These are the things which are deemed to accrue or arise in India. If any income has been received through or from any business connection, if any income has been received through or from any property, or through or from any transfer of capital asset, or by rendering any services or work done in India, or by rendering services outside India also, if that money is received by an Indian citizen from the Indian government. If the dividend is paid by an Indian company, anyway it is deemed to be accrued or arise in India. Interest, royalty, fees for technical services paid by government, always deemed to accrue or arise in India. If that is used for the purpose of a business or profession, or for that matter any source of income in India, then also it is deemed to accrue or arise in India. Same way, gift received by a non-resident individual or a foreign company from a resident Indian outside India in excess of 50,000 rupees would be taxable if that gift is received after 5th July 2019. You have to remember this date also, because in MCQs they will give gift is given on 30th June 2019. Unfortunately, that is not taxable. Why? Because that is not going to be coming under the purview of section 9.1. So, on or after 5th July 2019, during our previous year only, naturally. So that is why this date becomes also important. And next year onwards, this date is useless because previous year changes. Because 5/7/2019 is falling in our previous year because it is the latest amendment. This becomes very important. Otherwise, it is a very simple provision. Resident giving a gift to non-resident more than 50,000 rupees. Then in the hands of that non-resident, that becomes taxable, though it is not received in India. That is about income which is deemed to accrue or arise in India, most important section. Clear? The same things are repeated here, all of them are given. Then, where there are certain things defined also, what is a business connection? And let us be understanding very clearly. If we go through each of these things line by line, ultimately it is going to be one, waste of time, two, hyper complication, because even the most famous lawyers in India are also scratching their heads. What is business connection? Law defined it. Just like that, it will tell so many things. So rather than actually going through this, we just should understand. Sir, what if a short note on business connection is given? That is enough. If a short note on business connection is given, what should we write? That is enough. So basically, what is a business connection? In general understanding, we should go. If we go into the details of that, it is going to be unnecessarily a long and confusing process. But however, what is the relevance of business connection? Yes, that is very important, because if any income accruing or arising to any SSE in any place outside India also, whether directly or indirectly, through or from any business connection in India, will be taxable because it will be deemed to accrue or arise in India. That is the first point we are talking about here. These are all the things we are talking about. In that first point is business connection. Then any property, then any source of income, then any transfer, like that. All of the others are part of this same table. Once this table is known, all provisions are already included in that. Details are there here. When can we say a business connection? It's a very vague thing, but still can't help it. This is how it is there. What is a business connection? What the law said, that's first of all, this itself is a dangerous thing. It says business connection include. There itself gone. So it could be anything also, beyond what is explained here, beyond what is defined here. Includes any business activity carried out through a person acting on behalf of the non-resident. So what does the act intend here in relation to business connection? What they are talking about is, of course, non-resident, that is always there. Of course, the SSE is non-resident, but he is earning income through or from a business connection in India. So, what is that business connection is, that SSE who is a non-resident has some business activity he is carrying out through whom? Through a person acting on behalf of that non-resident. Where that business connection is there? In India. So now just understand, if there is a non-resident, for example purposes, who has an agent in India, who has a agent in India, and that agent in India will collect some business activity, he will market certain services or goods within India. Ultimately, the agent will only act like an agent. He is not the one who is earning the income. In turn, he will give that money to the principal. And who is that principal? The non-resident. So who is earning the money? The non-resident. But non-resident, is he in India? No, he is outside India. But should we say that his income will be excluded? Can we do that? No. That is what we are saying. No problem, Baba. Even though you are a non-resident, even though you are not in India, even though you are staying outside India, if you had any kind of business activity carried through an agent in India, for that the word used is through a person acting on behalf of non-resident. Simply, who is a person who will act on behalf of another person? What is the name of that guy? So simply speaking, that is agent. We don't need to dig you all this. Simply speaking, an agent. So if the non-resident has any agent in India and he gets business in India through this agent, automatically there is a business connection. And what are the business that this agent collects in India for the non-resident, on behalf of the non-resident, that all will be deemed to accrue or arise in India. So then the law has created so many other things which are not really required to be written, but just understanding them is not a problem. So what is this person? This person agent, what should he have? He should be acting on behalf of non-resident. That is the first point. That is the nature of this person. So this person is acting on behalf of the non-resident. And not only what he should be doing, usually he should have an authority to conclude contracts on behalf of the non-resident. Means this agent is going to different people, customers, and concluding the contracts. And these words are used habitually and all that. These are all law games which are unnecessary. So how do you define habitually and all? This is a very difficult problem, because practically it is difficult to prove that also. That is the reason I was telling, these are all the things, litigation points. Practically, they are all to be really proven in the court of law. We cannot really explain them also. We cannot really understand them, what is habitually, what is not habitually. When can we say he has an authority? When can we say he doesn't have an authority? None of these questions can be answered in theory. The law just blindly used the word business connection. When people asked what is business connection, they gave an explanation which is more confusing than the word business connection itself. That is the unfortunate situation of the law. Bad law, no doubt. Bad provisions, no doubt. What is the proof of the bad law? Too much litigation. When there is litigation too much, that means the law is not clear. So that is a very clear indication of what is business connection, what is income deemed to accrue or arise in India, place of effective management. These are all very litigation points. So in general, what is that essence only we have to understand. So in general, what are we talking about business connection? Yes, business connection is considered to be there when a non-resident carries out some business activity through a person acting on his behalf. And that person we can call him as an agent who is acting on behalf of the non-resident to conclude the contracts. And this person, whoever is in India, who is the agent, has the authority to conclude the contracts. Simple. Clear? That is all enough. Then, at least, if not, if let us say he doesn't have any authority to conclude the contracts, but at least he maintains a stock of goods or merchandise from which he regularly delivers goods or merchandise on behalf of the non-resident. So that is also quite possible. He is a stockist. He holds the stock for the purpose of a non-resident, and this guy collects the orders and delivers the goods or merchandise on behalf of non-resident. So what you have to just write in the exam is, point number 1, the person acting on behalf of the non-resident should have an authority to conclude contracts on behalf of the non-resident. That's what you should focus. Second point, that person who is acting on behalf of that non-resident should have or should maintain in India a stock of goods or merchandise from which he regularly delivers goods or merchandise on behalf of the non-resident. Let us say that is also not there. Clear? If not, he will secure orders in India mainly or wholly for the non-resident. These are the 3 points you should write majorly for business connection. That is a short note question you have to focus more on. Already if some of you are thinking whether there is business connection or not, I am very confused. I cannot do anything for you. I am sorry for your confusion. But actually the finance managers and finance ministers of the country have to tell you sorry. I am not the one to tell you sorry, because that is the nonsensical way of drafting the law they have done. I have not done. We can't help it. That is the nature of this provision. Business connection is defined like this. So what our job will be, not to worry too much about, oh, who is non-resident. And by the way, nobody is going to come to you who is abroad and asking your advice, valuable advice about whether I have business connection in India or not. So don't worry about all that. So it's a very big thing what we are talking. Small, just a classroom, small kids game we are not talking. Place of effective management. Just like that we say poem and all. It's a big thing. We're talking multi-million dollars businesses. We are talking about huge things which have too much of dispute in the court of law. So don't unnecessarily get into the realities of the world, which is way bigger than our thinking process, understanding ability, and beyond all that, our actual practical experience of that. So that is why just you have to think about what is a business connection in India is that wherever any business activity is carried out through a person acting on behalf of the non-resident in India, then we can say that person, non-resident, has a business connection in India. Simple. So the person acting on behalf of the non-resident, you can call him as an agent, no problem. That's not an issue. Agent is not a bad word. But generally the word what is used in the law is person acting on behalf of the non-resident should have an authority to conclude contracts on behalf of the non-resident. First condition. Second condition. Sir, he doesn't have an authority. No problem. Even if he maintains a stock of goods or merchandise in India, from which he delivers goods to the customers on behalf of non-resident, then also there is a business connection. Or this person, once again, who is this person who is doing all this? The agent. The agent secures orders in India for whom? Either mainly or wholly for non-resident. So what is mainly, what is wholly is understandable. What is mainly? Questionable. Every word in this is questionable. What is habitually? I cannot answer. What is mainly? I cannot answer. So what do you say that authority? I cannot answer. So all these things regularly, none of these words can be answered because every word here is a litigation, I would say, riser. So don't worry about them. Just 3 points you have to write. 1, agent having an authority to conclude contracts on behalf of the non-resident. 2, agent maintains the stock of goods or merchandise on behalf of the non-resident and delivers goods to the customers in India. And 3, agent secures orders in India mainly or wholly for the non-resident on behalf of non-resident. That's it. That's what we call it as business connection. Nothing else is required. That is more than enough for a short note question, particularly when we talk about the word business connection. So here there is a kind of example that is given. Let us say Mr. A acting on behalf of Mr. X, who is a non-resident. So A is the agent, X is the non-resident. And A secures order for the X non-resident. So definitely there is business connection directly established. No problem. However, he secures order for Mr. Y. Y is a non-resident. So A is actually securing orders on behalf of Mr. X is okay. But secures order not here for Mr. X, he is securing orders for Mr. Y, who is also non-resident. When can we say that there is a business connection? If Y is controlled by X or X is controlled by Y. If these two are one and the same. For example, if Mr. X, Mr. Y we are talking, if they are having control on each other, or if it is like a company's subsidiary company, holding company, such type of situations, if there are existent, then we can say, though this person Mr. A is actually securing order for Mr. Y, still he will be called as he is acting on behalf of Mr. X because X has a control on Y or Y has a control on X, or both X and Y are commonly controlled by Z in that case also. Now already some people are already thinking, how can Mr. Y control Mr. X? Useless questions, because this example itself is useless. When we are talking about a nonsensical example, questions also will be useless. It's only an example, that's all. No individual in the world can control another individual. Everybody knows that. But why example is given? Just for understanding purposes. Point here what we have to understand that we should be focusing on. Not in answering or not in having a doubt that how can X control Y? That is undemocratic now. That is illegal now. Yes, if anybody controls other person, actually he should be sent to jail. So controlled by is not in that sense. Controlled by means they have a relationship like that, wherein the benefit or the direct authority is not flowing from the agent directly to the non-resident, but it is going indirectly. That is the point we have to understand. So here, business connection in this case is directly established. In this case, the second case, it is not directly established because Mr. A, who is the agent in India, is not acting on behalf of Mr. X directly. If he does that, no problem. Directly, there is a business connection between Mr. A and Mr. X. So, though X is a non-resident, whatever the income Mr. A makes in India on behalf of Mr. X will be taxable in the hands of Mr. X. There is all straightforward point we are talking about all this time. So, what is the new thing here? Sir, even though Mr. A is not acting on behalf of Mr. X, if Mr. A is acting on behalf of Mr. Y, then also we can say there is a business connection between Mr. A and Mr. X. So Y is another third party. We have three different people here, three characters. Here there are two characters only, first case, A and X. In the second case we have three characters. A is there, X is there, and Y is also there. Still there is a business connection between A and X, though there is no direct link between them. How, sir? How? If Mr. X controls Y, or Y controls X, or both X and Y are controlled by somebody called Z. If that is the case, then also X and Y are one and the same in the eyes of law, though they are different people. So when A is acting on behalf of Y also, it is deemed to have been acting on behalf of Mr. X only. That means there is a business connection in that case also. Essence of all that is simply the business connection need not be direct. Even if it is indirectly existing also, it will still be called as a business connection. And when there is any income that is arising out of business connection in India, that is deemed to accrue or arise in India, hence that will be taxable according to section 9(1). That is the point we have to always keep in mind about business connection in general. Clear? Next, is business connection about a general agent also, a general commission agent? Can we say that that is also having a business connection? No, that is not a business connection. A broker who acts on behalf of everybody or any other general agent, then also can we call it as a business connection? No. So here main point here to note is the relation between the agent is in our example Mr. A, and principal could be X or Y depending upon the situation. So that should be mainly or wholly this agent should be working for the non-resident, then only there is a business connection. So one more litigation, what is mainly? Who knows that? What is mainly? So everything in this is practically very difficult. Also that is why you should not break your brain with all these practical questions and doubts and all. Simply, boss, this can be a 3 marks question. How to get my 3 marks or 4 marks? That's it. And if there is given that in the question that there is business connection, we should know very well that definitely that income which is arising through or from business connection in India is taxable. That much we should know. What is business connection? 3 points you should write. And business connection could be direct or indirect. On the other side, a broker, a general commission agent or any other agent shall not be deemed to have any business connection. That's it. On top of that, just because business connection has been always a litigation point, there were so many court cases. So they have thought we should explain this. So they gave all this explanation which is worse than the provision itself. Not enough. Still they wanted to mess this further. So what they created? One more explanation recently created. This is the recent amendment. Last year only this happened. Then they created another word called significant economic presence. Business connection itself is generic name. In that something was mentioned, something was not mentioned. At least okay, somehow we are able to cope with that. Now what they came out with? There is one more point called as significant economic presence. Also constitutes a business connection in India, they said. Now we have to scratch our heads. What is significant economic presence? I am sure nobody can prove this. That is a very difficult thing in reality. And again a subject matter of huge litigation. However, they just wanted to keep it open. It's not the intention of the lawmakers that they want to make some revenue out of this from tax revenue from non-residents. but they want to keep it open. See, understand the requirement or significant economic presence definitions or explanations, usefulness. Only from that point we can understand. Let us say if there are any goods, services or property which are all done by non-resident in India, including the provision of or download of data or software in India. Clear? So first point is just to understand this is mostly in relation to this. Mostly. The idea is this. Like a lot of you or some of you might be playing video games. Some of you definitely might be playing, I'm sure, in the mobile phones. Free games anyway. Typically, we Indians play them. But suddenly, sometimes we may pay some amounts also to buy some video games, small or big amounts. When you pay this money, actually a lot of times you don't even know where this is going. Maybe the developer of the game could be in Belgium or somewhere in Russia or somebody from Japan. We don't know actually where the money is going also. But you pay that money. Let us say somebody like you has paid some 500 rupees in Indian rupees for a game to be purchased from outside India. The person who has sold the game is somewhere outside India. We don't know where he is also. We don't know. Actually, Indian government also cannot know. The world of internet is so difficult to track that. Where from these games are all uploaded, where from these games are all coming, where from these are all there happening. It's very difficult to track them. Maybe the couple of college students would have developed the game in Belgium. We don't know that. But money goes to them. Point is, you are paying the money. Being an Indian, when you paid the money, let us say, for example, the Belgian student has received the money. That person, has he earned the money in India or not? Question comes. Then naturally the answer is yes, because he has sold his product here, that is video game. So though may not be directly, through internet he can do that. So you have purchased it, he has sold it, he received the money, he has earned the money. He received money outside India. He didn't come to your house to collect that money, but he provided the services definitely in India, no doubt about it. So question comes, should we tax it? Definitely the government will say yes, we should tax it. How to tax it? Earlier it was difficult. Business connection was not enough because he doesn't have any agent also. Earlier what they said, there should be an agent acting on behalf of non-resident. That Belgian student doesn't have any agent, he doesn't have anything. He just has maybe started some developing of a game, he uploaded to Google Play Store, somebody downloaded, he got money. So he's getting money just like that. So like this 100 examples can be given. So you are watching some video, some person somewhere who has really uploaded that video could get money. We don't know all those things. Who is receiving money from us also? Directly we cannot know. You may be watching one YouTube video which is showing you some advertisements. Advertisements are maybe Indian advertisements. You are watching them and the Google might receive money in India. Definitely yes. But when the Google pays some money for the person who originally uploaded this video on the YouTube, that person may be anywhere. You might have watched the video which is made anywhere in the world. So the person who is receiving the money is somebody. We cannot track them also a lot of cases. So it's a big problem actually speaking. So these existing things, business connection and all these things, blah, 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 old outdated things could not cover these type of situations where any person who is a non-resident renders some services or sends any goods in relation to including provision of or download of data or software in India. If that happens, there is no agent and all. So can we say that he has no business connection? Because business connection never said this word. So what they recently introduced? Another new word they have introduced and they are calling it as what? Significant economic presence they are calling it. Of course, this Belgian person who received 500 rupees from you, like that maybe, just for example, let us say throughout India only 10 people have downloaded this software, just for example. So he has just after all received 5,000 rupees. Indian government is not interested in that. Should we say that this Belgian student has significant economic presence in India? After all, it is not possible. So what we say, not always it has significant economic presence, but the aggregate of the payments means the total amounts that that person, whoever is the non-resident receiving the money from India by rendering services to India, that person in any particular previous year, the aggregate of the money what he is receiving exceeds such amounts as may be prescribed. So they did not even prescribe the amount. They want to keep in their hands only. If the government of India tomorrow says anybody receives more than, let us say, 1 crore rupees in a year from these type of services rendered in India, that also will be considered as a significant economic presence, and the recipient has to pay tax in India. If the government says that, if, then automatically that becomes also taxable. Right now, no such prescription is there. That is why they have just kept it in their hands as may be prescribed, whatever the limit it may be. I'm sure definitely it is not going to be in thousands, it will be in a bigger amount. And we are using the word significant economic presence. All small chutak mutak softwares, some PDF downloading softwares, $5, $10 softwares. Like this, so many softwares will be there who are earning money by selling their products to India, and they are not at all related to India. They are somewhere outside India completely. They don't have any agent in India. Under normal circumstances, according to earlier definitions, they don't have any business connection. But now, according to this provision or explanation, now we can call them, they have a significant economic presence. Not always, that too. When the amount that they receive in aggregate in a particular year exceeds such amount as may be prescribed. If it exceeds. What is that amount? We don't know. And who are those people? We don't know. So everything is grey here. Dark completely. Nothing visible here. But government just wanted this provision for its safeguarding purposes. That's all. And not only that. Another thing, systematic and continuous soliciting of the business activities. Soliciting means in general the advertisement revenue. And second thing is engaging in interaction with users in India through digital means. So interaction with users in India through digital means once again it could be through Netflix, YouTube, any other things where the users in India are being interacted by somebody else through some digital means. So of course, these are official things. We have a separate Netflix in India, and also they will have no problem like this. They would be definitely having a clear record of how much money has been earned in India. But like that example I'm telling, like that there may be so many other companies which might solicit business or give advertisements and earn advertisement revenue in India through digital means, but they have no presence in India. Still quite possible. All these things are possible because of internet. So now we don't have any option but to call them as they are having significant economic presence. So what the government can prescribe in this case, the users will be prescribed by the government. Means a number. Let us say if any particular thing, let us say Twitter has exceeded say 10 crores users in India. That means it is also having a significant economic presence in India. Any income that it is making from the interaction with users or by giving any advertisements. Say Facebook is a live example. Facebook has advertisements also nowadays. So if Facebook has a significant economic presence in India or not? Definitely yes. Because users are definitely more than that number as may be prescribed. How much is that number? That we don't know. That government will prescribe. Whatever that number the government might prescribe, according to that, there will be the definition of significant economic presence. Definitely Facebook will cross that number, whatever that number may be. It has significant economic presence. So what is Facebook is getting? It is having a advertisement revenue in India because it is giving advertisements to its users in India. Okay, Facebook may have an Indian office and all. It's a different story. Imagine it doesn't have. Facebook doesn't have an Indian office. Twitter doesn't have an Indian office. Imagine, I'm talking. Imagine Google doesn't have an Indian office. But are they not earning revenue from India? Is YouTube not earning revenue from India by giving advertisements? Absolutely yes. If they have Indian office, there is no problem. We don't need all this. But what if they don't have Indian office? Still they are earning money in India. So should we leave them? We should not. That is why these definitions are all given. That is called significant economic presence. So once again, I'm repeating, these two are theoretically very important. If at all a question comes, it can be only a case-based question. What are the two questions? One is what is business connection? Two is what is significant economic presence? Clear? That's what we have to be very clearly defining when it comes to theory questions. Theory questions, why is only these are important? Maybe worst case scenario, a case based question also is okay, but there also it is difficult. Now why? Because there is no limit we know here. Just it mentions that as may be prescribed, how much is prescribed, that nobody knows. So it's only a general concept wherein we don't want to lose the tax revenue from the digital activities which are happening from outside India, but those people are all earning money from India. We want to tax them. That is the essence of this. How to tax them? So we have this provision now. Another question, some people might think, how are we really taxing them? That is none of our business. That government will take care of, courts will take care of. If there are any cases, a lot of litigation will be there in this also. Naturally, the government will tell you have a significant economic presence. A client will tell you that I don't have a significant economic presence. They will prove, they will go to court. All that is their headache. Don't worry about it. Our headache is only to be able to define or explain what is business connection and what is significant economic presence. By the way, the business connection definition includes the definition of business, this significant economic presence. By clearly it is given. Significant economic presence shall also constitute business connection in India. So this is an explanation only to business connection. So all this is going with section 9.1. First point itself, if any non-resident is earning any income through or from a business connection in India, it is deemed to accrue or arise in India. Then the question arises, what is business connection? We have 3 points here. What is a business connection? About these 3 things. 1, where there is a person who is concluding the contracts on behalf of the non-resident in India. The person who is concluding the contracts is in India and is an agent. On behalf of the non-resident, is concluding the contracts. Second, the agent is maintaining a stock in India on behalf of the non-resident. Third, the agent is securing orders in India, mainly or wholly for the non-resident. Then we can call it as business connection. Not only that, if this person, whoever is there, a non-resident, if that non-resident has any kind of significant economic presence in India, then also that will be called as business connection. Then a question comes, what is significant economic presence? These are the 2 points you should write exactly. Goods, services or property carried out by a non-resident in India, including the provision of download of data or software in India. Including, they said, but intention is basically that. Same way, continuous or systematic soliciting of business activities. Soliciting of business activities is the word. Simply it is advertising, nothing but. Are engaging in interaction with the users in India through digital means. That is called significant economic presence when either the revenue of these people is more than a limit that is prescribed, or the number of users is more than a limit that has been prescribed by the government. If that threshold is crossed, what is that threshold is a question mark, sir. We don't know that. The government will take care of it. By notification it will give, not in the law. It has just kept the power with itself. So if the threshold of the revenue or the kind of users in India, if that is exceeded, then automatically these non-residents are deemed to have significant economic presence. Because they have significant economic presence, they have business connection. Because they have business connection, all this income is deemed to accrue or arise in India. That is how layer wise these explanations are added. It is in reality highly complicated, no doubt. It's a gray area, but that should not stop us from being able to answer these questions. We should be just thorough with the concept of them. That is enough. Understanding them is enough. That is about section 9.1 in total, and very particularly in relation to what is business connection. Of course, there are some other points like what is not a business connection. That is another theory question. Other than that, remaining things are all already what we discussed. So mostly from theoretical point of view, all the required points have already been discussed. None of the new things will be really required to be, I would say, examined in detail. So in the next class, we will just complete what is not a business connection. So once again, only from a theory point of view. Theory point of view, what is a business connection is one question. What is significant economic presence is another question. If business connection is asked, actually you should write both. Business connection, because significant economic presence is also part of business connection. Now another theory question, what is business connection? State exceptions. That we will discuss tomorrow in the next class. So these are theory questions. Then all this nonsense for what? For what? For determining whether there is any income which is deemed to accrue or arise in India. Okay. What is that for? Why 9.1? That is for making that taxable in respect of the income of even a non-resident. So this is all having a link to tax incidence. That is the reason why we should be very thorough with all these individual points of section 9.1, very particularly business connection, only from theory point of view. Problems point of view, so far any provision, all the provisions whatever we discussed are 100% enough For solving all the questions of this chapter, we should be already having, I would say, we are all equipped to solve the questions of this chapter. All that is remaining and what we are discussing now is theoretical aspects, business connection, significant economic presence. In the next class, we'll discuss about what is not a business connection, what are exceptions to the general word or rule called business connection. That is another theoretical aspect. Of course, theoretical does not mean there cannot be any case or there cannot be any points in the problems. There is always a possibility. See, problems does not mean in taxation about numbers. In taxation, problems could be in the form of cases also. Like 4 or 5 different situations can be given and we will be asked to find out whether such income is taxable or not taxable. In that, all this discussion will be very much useful. So, we are not touching anything which is useless. If it is just already a repetition or what we already know, we are leaving it. Other than that, whatever we are discussing in the class, now everybody should be very much thorough with that. And once we are thorough with all these provisions, problem solving, whether they are numerical or case based, will become easier. Right? With that, we can conclude today's session and we'll discuss about some other provisions and problems in the next session. Till that time, take care. Bye bye. Thank you very much.